welcome to the Skipping Stone 15 Minutes That Matter webinar series. On behalf of the Skipping Stone team, we appreciate your time and effort joining today's Q&A on the topic International Retail Market Opportunities. Hi, I'm Rebecca Kelly, Skipping Stone Director of Marketing, and in this webinar we're visiting with Mr. John Landry. He's one of our Skipping Stone principals, and just a brief background on John. He's an energy expert with over 25 years in energy industry. He has 12 years, which is nearly half his career, in retail energy, and prior to joining our Skipping Stone team, he headed up the Northeast region of Just Energy as their GM and as Senior VP. Since joining Skipping Stone, John's been working with clients and retailers expanding into Japan and throughout the U.S. He's been helping retailers with strategic and operational improvements. Last but not least, John's authored our just-released International Retail Energy Markets Report, published by Skipping Stone. This is a 170-plus page research publication, and it covers 17 countries. It includes everything from market rules to utility information, among other things. And that table of contents and everything is available to you. And if you'd like a copy, feel free to email John directly at jlandry@skippingstone.com. John, welcome to 15 Minutes, and now it's up to you to make it matter.
Thanks, Rebecca, and thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Well, anyway, to kick off this webinar, one of the major first questions after the introduction is what actually prompted you to develop the International Retail Energy Markets Report?
Sure. So, over the past couple of years, folks I know in retail energy and would meet at trade shows and everything would be very, talked a lot about how the U.S. market had been saturated and how growth had kind of stalled out, and we're looking for ways to grow. And international always came up as a topic. But people were frustrated because there wasn't a really good centralized source of information. And a few of them had tried to utilize a person internally to try to gather information, use Google, and found that, that was kind of a tough road. There were a lot of the data is in a different language. And so we, looked at inside Skipping Stone, and we said, hey, we're doing a lot of work and have a lot of experience in a lot of these markets. So why don't we pull together a report that puts it all in one place and makes it convenient for folks? We worked with our clients and folks we know so that we could, structure the report to give them the right information to evaluate where maybe there's some good potential in some of these markets.
Okay, so the report has an intense table of contents, major countries in Asia Pacific, Australia, Japan, South Korea, and Singapore, and also it includes Mexico with a dozen or major energy-specific retail market countries in Europe. Why is there so much of an international retail market kind of getting so much attention? I mean, this is all about international retail markets. What's going on, John?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, prospects for growth in the U.S. have really flattened out. For a long time, we saw really good growth in the U.S. In a lot of the different markets, and that's really came to end probably 3 or 4 years ago. Seen slight growth in the C&I sector across the retail markets in the U.S., and residential has really flattened out, topping out right around 16 million switched accounts. So this is a big challenge for retailers because they're facing pressure on their sales costs, especially in the residential sector, and we've seen a lot of margin degradation on the C&I side. So for the growth of business, international markets are a good place to look.
Well, what is the potential for retailers exploring expansion globally then?
Yeah, there's a lot of really good markets outside of the U.S. in the international realm. The total potential probably is on the order of about 10 times the U.S. market.
For everybody joining this webinar, feel free to send questions that you'd like me to ask John. Just feel free to email me at rkelly@skippingstone.com now and throughout. We really encourage you to ask questions, and please note you'll receive an email with the webinar today and a link to our recorded webinar. This is, you'll be able to email it to colleagues and clients. If there's a question that we didn't get to this afternoon, John will definitely get a copy of it and he'll respond directly. John, the next question that I have for you is, what are the most typical market structures outside of the United States?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the most typical evolution of the markets outside of the U.S. that we see is similar to what we've seen in some of the U.S. markets, in that you have to take a integrated utility and kind of bust it up into its parts. So we've seen, a legal unbundling and disaggregation of the vertically integrated utility into generation, transmission, and distribution. That structure, along with a typical wholesale market that's also similar in terms of day ahead and real-time scheduling settlement, also exists in a lot of markets. There are also numerous financial markets that allow you to hedge, longer-term products. In some countries, one of the things that is interesting is that there are a lot of different distribution utilities, and often those are utilities that serve the small towns and villages. So, for example, in Finland and Norway, they each have about 150 different distribution utilities, but are served by typically one utility. So there are about 7 major distribution system operating companies in either Finland or Norway.
Okay, a question came in, John. If you had to pick your top non-U.S. retail markets, what would they be?
So I think there's a lot of attention on some really good potential.
You may not realize this, but Skipping Stone has been around for the last 20 years of innovation. We've had the pleasure of working with over 270 clients in energy markets worldwide. We have our headquarters out of Boston. We have offices in Los Angeles, Houston, Atlanta, go Braves, had to do that, sorry. And since 2014, Tokyo, Japan. John, we're seeing a lot of action in Japan. Why is this country getting so much attention?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Skipping Stone has been heavily involved in Japan for 3 years. We have a really good presence there, and we've helped multiple retailers get stood up there, as well as a couple of technology companies as well. Japan's getting a lot of really good attention because there's a lot of opportunity there. It's a very big market. It's at the very early stages of retail competition. There are 80 million electric meters and 30 million gas meters. So this all came about from the aftermath of the tsunami in 2011. The Japanese government really wanted to restructure both the wholesale and retail markets, and has really been pushing both of those markets forward. The market for electricity opened in April of 2016, and the market for gas opened in April of 2017. And there's been really good activity on both fronts. We have seen about 4% of the low voltage, which are the small commercial and residential accounts, have already switched over to a competitive supplier on the electric side. And we're also seeing activity on the gas side, although it's very early stage at this point. We did a lot of research and actually also have a gas wholesale and retail market report available for Japan as well.
I got a note. Someone said that your voice cut out when you were explaining the top non-U.S. retail markets. I know, John, if you just wanted to list them again with Japan at the top.
Yeah, so again, it's Japan. I think there's a lot of attention. There's a lot of different markets that are interesting, but we've seen a lot of activity in Japan, in the UK, and in Germany recently.
So, Nihongo hanashimasu ka? How's your Japanese, John?
My Japanese isn't very good, but luckily we have a really good team in both our LA and Tokyo office that, you know, is a powerful combination with our years of experience in retail markets here in the U.S.
Well, I know that we have fluent bilinguals in our LA office as well as in Tokyo, you know, combining the retail markets experts. I mean, this is where we are helping clients with M&As and market entry for international companies seeking competitive growth opportunities. So, John, what kind of competitors are actually operating in international retail markets?
Yeah, so in the international retail markets, you do have the regulated tariff or the default supply similar to what we see in the U.S. POR markets. The thing that makes it a little bit different in some of these markets is that the regulators are pretty actively trying to get customers over to competitive supply, though. And in a lot of cases, there are market mechanisms that will eliminate the regulated supply tariff for the default supply once certain milestones are hit and certain conditions are hit. So that's, or certain timelines in some cases. So you do have to contend with a default supply. The other type of competitors is really two other types of off the regulated supply for the contestable market, so to speak, is the first is generation owners that also provide retail supply. So that is something that we see in a lot of the international markets. A good example is in Australia, the big three retailers there, AGL, Origin, and Energy Australia, together own over 50% of the generation in the territories where they're serving. There are also entrepreneurial companies that are out there that are blazing new trails in retail, and a few have built really impressive portfolios. One of my favorite examples is First Utility in the UK, who has crested over 1 million customers through some really innovative marketing that takes on the big six retailers there head to head.
When you're looking at some of the examples that you had mentioned, are there typical regulatory approaches that Skipping Stone uses in various countries that you've researched? And also, what are the licensing procedures in some of these countries?
So the really good thing about a lot of the international markets is that you're dealing with usually one, at most two different regulatory authorities to get your license to operate in the entire country, which is really great. In the U.S., we see, all 14 electric markets that are open right now you have to have a different license. So this is really convenient when you're entering a country. The typical application process is similar, but a little bit more stringent in some places, where you have to have a lot more detail around your business plan, your supply plan, your operating procedures, how you're doing customer care, a lot more attention to detail as far as the application process goes. But once you have the one license, then you're good to go for the whole country. So a good example is the regulator in Japan is METI, which is the Ministry of Energy, Trade, and Industry. So you get one license. It covers the 10 different utilities in Japan that span all 47 prefectures, which is similar to a U.S. state.
All right, John, another note just came in on my email. Thoughts on VR and battery storage integration in retail markets? Anything to say about that? Yeah,
so across Europe and all the markets around the world, we're seeing a lot of course, attention on distributed assets. And especially in Europe, they have very, very aggressive goals around renewables, so we expect that to play a major part in those international markets.
John, we're about out of time. I can't believe how fast 15 minutes goes. Webinar participants, you can also go to our website, skippingstone.com. Click on Insights on the navigation bar for more information on how you can order your copy of International Retail Energy Markets Report, as well as getting in touch with John. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. Do you have any additional comments?
having spent a big part of my career in retail, I think that the international opportunities are certainly exciting. I think that U.S. companies are savvy, very entrepreneurial. I think they can be very successful in some of these other markets.
Thank you. And thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. I hope you, too, look forward to our next 15 Minutes That Matter with